Eat, sleep, bet, repeat. That's how we get down on the opening line at EliteSportsBetting.com. I'll be your host, Benny Ricciardi, and today I got a special show for you. As you guys know, earlier this week, or maybe you don't know, that's why we're doing the show. Earlier this week, we launched our NFL package over at FantasyGuru.com. So I got three of our contributors here, Tyler Beaker, Russ Clay, Armando Marçal, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of that stuff. Now, we're not going to give you everything because these guys have been writing articles for a couple months right now to get all that information into the package. But really, I'm going to be selfish at the moment. Everybody I know right now, including these three guys here, is starting their NFL draft season by playing some best ball stuff. So what I want to talk about here today is a couple things that I keep noticing in a lot of different best balls and see how my guys would handle these situations. But before we get into that, let's just go a little bit of round robin here. Tyler, we'll start with you. How you going? What are you working on? And, say hello to the people.
What's up, people? Happy to be back. What I'm working on right now is our best ball portion of our draft guide. Released about 8 or so articles yesterday talking about introduction to the format, how to play it, roster construction strategies, players to target, ideal quarterback pairings, consistent winners. I kind of covered a whole bunch of different things. Big shout out to Armando for helping me with that. We did a lot of players to target and players to fade, and it's just a lot of information there. I definitely recommend checking it out. And moving forward, I guess things I'm working on are our slot wide receiver grid. That's a new thing we're trying to debut at Fantasy Guru, where trying to find ideal wide receivers that operate in the slot heavily and like their backup counterparts, trying to figure out those depth charts ahead of time. And I'll be doing an update on that later today.
All right, nice. Russ, what are you working on?
Yeah, honestly, I'm working on reading this best ball guide that came out yesterday. So I was in the meetings when this thing was getting, thought through, but that's a lot of new content out there, and I've been reading it myself. So fun stuff, and obviously the draft guide is fully releasing on Friday, so I'm really excited about that. Have dynasty roster reviews, dynasty rankings, my rookie evaluation tactics that I'm really proud of, and a lot of fun stuff. So yeah, good stuff over here.
All right, Armando, how about you, bro?
Oh man, same old, grinding out, helping. I helped out Tyler a little bit, like you mentioned, with the best ball content. We got a QB bye week cheat sheet that we're gonna have this year. It's new, where pretty much for your quarterbacks, we're gonna list the best options based on the strength of schedule during their bye weeks. So that's something that we're gonna kick off soon. The league formats article that I've been working on now for like a month and a half, and this weekend I'm going to be doing a same faces, new place. So players that move from one team to another, how that's going to impact their fantasy value this season.
All right. And remember, guys, if you haven't signed up yet, you can get over to FantasyGuru.com. You'll see the NFL draft guide. Right now, I think it's actually discounted down for the release as well. If you're on Twitter, you can follow any of these guys and myself on Twitter or the Fantasy Guru team. And, you'll be able to see the updates when the new articles come out and all that stuff. But what you guys came here today is to get a little taste of how it's going this year and what we can do. So I think everybody would agree. At this time of year, I call this best ball season. Because most of the time, if you're playing drafts, this is the time when you're doing, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, this would have been the time when we were probably doing what we call mock drafts. But nowadays, we're all degenerate gamblers, so our mock drafts have to be for money. And that's basically what the best ball style is. And I see you all shaking your heads. I mean, am I wrong or, am I right?
You're absolutely right, bro.
Absolutely.
I mean, you're absolutely right. We talked about it, I think last week it was, Benny, that we're using these as mock drafts. And it's, it's $10 most of them. I know Tyler and I are doing one now together. FFPC, $35 best ball. That one's pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, we're treating these as mock drafts, and what better way than to have a little bit of money on it?
Yeah, well, I mean, honestly, the thing that I really like about having a little bit of money on it, as opposed to just like when you used to go to Yahoo and do the free mock drafts over there, is when somebody has no money on it, they might be effing around. Maybe they make their first 4 or 5 picks and then they walk away because there's something better on TV or something like that. even though it's not a lot of money, even if you're playing a $10 or $20, like, you know, it's still some kind of money where you're not going to like half-ass it. You're going to at least say, all right, I'm going to give this a good hour of my attention and make my picks and go through all that stuff. I can't do the slow drafts, man, because some of these people they just slow the damn thing down. Like 4 days from now, if I'm still drafting, I'd rather put a bullet through my head. Like it's really but like, you know, if you can sit down for an hour or two and just bang out a draft, that's the way that I like to do it. And that's kind of what I've been doing lately here. Now, there are a bunch of sites that are offering these right now. I mean, you know, Armando, you mentioned NFFC. I know Yahoo has some, which is a little weird because it's only a 10-team one when you do the Yahoo one, which is what I'm not. It changes things a little bit because you're used to the 12-team one, and all of a sudden there are guys that are available in like round 4. They're like, how's this guy available in round? And they're like, oh, okay, yeah, it's still only pick 35 or whatever. So, but is there a site that you guys like using more or less than the other ones? Like where have you been doing most of your drafts? Like Tyler, we'll start with you. Like where have you been doing most of your best ball drafts right now?
I've been doing it kind of at the 2 more popular sites, Fanball's Best Ball 10 and FFPC. Those are my 2 go-to places.
All right, how about you, Russ? Where have you been playing?
Yeah, Fanball is a good site, and also I'll say, you know, a few years ago, I loved doing the $1, $2, and $5 slow drafts on draft because it was like if I could have 4 or 5 at a time going on, then it was like I'm always kind of getting close or something's going on. But obviously, pace has slowed since those types of formats have.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we get that back soon. But,
I agree because that was my favorite place to have drafts last year. I must have had. I would sit down with like $100 in my account and play the big $25 one. I'd just be like, all right, draft. Next thing you know, it's like 1 a.m. You're like, oh, I should probably get some sleep. Like, you know. How about you, Armando? Where have you been playing yours?
Fanball and FFPC is where I'm playing most of mine right now.
All right, cool. So a lot of us are playing on the same one, which is good because that's gonna kind of dovetail into the questions I kind of want to throw out at you guys right now. So I've been noticing a couple things from my draft. Took some notes last night. I did another 3 best ball drafts last night. Took some notes on stuff, and I wanted to bounce it off you guys and see if you're seeing the same things there. So here's my first question. Especially in best ball. Best ball, running backs are a little bit more important. You know, you can go with a 0 RB theory maybe and get away with it in a redraft kind of league. But in best ball, you pretty much go after running backs early, or at least want to make sure you have some in the stable, right? Give me the second non-running back drafted, not named Michael Thomas. Because
in FFPC with tight end premium, it'd be Travis Kelce for me.
Okay, with the tight end premium, that actually makes some sense. And honestly, even without the tight end premium, I don't really hate that as the second player. Basically, what I'm asking is, other than a running back or Michael Thomas, who's the first guy off your board, Russ?
We've actually done sort of reviewing their draft on a live stream last week for Fantasy Guru. And I think we're all in the same vibe here of this Chiefs offense and Tyreek Hill. It's close in that tier, but I think he's my WR2 right now. And I mean, I just look at 2018 and then what he did, you know, when healthy in 2019, and pretty undeniable production regardless of how you feel about the man. So I'm in there. Yeah.
Armando, how about you? Who's your next player off the board not named Michael Thomas that doesn't play the running back position?
It's Tyreek Hill as well. We really talked about it, especially in best ball where, you know, I think he's very consistent. Like he's pretty consistent for, you know, pretty much every game. But that ceiling that he possesses is so high. I mean, it is so high. So right after him, I'd probably go Hill.
Now, when you guys are building these best ball teams, though, are you trying to go RB early? Because, I mean, to me, the first 4 picks is pretty simple. They've basically been the same in just about every draft I'm in. You could argue the 4th pick because there's 2 or 3 other guys that you could put into that spot. And then where you – like 4 through 7 to me is basically like, you know, Henry, Kamara, Dalvin Cook, Michael Thomas in some order. You know, that's pretty much the 4 guys that are going after, like, Saquon, Zeke, and Christian McCaffrey as the first 3 there. Almost every draft I've been in, that's kind of been the way that it's going at the beginning. So that's kind of the way I look at it, which is why I asked that question about the next non-Michael Thomas wide receiver off the board, because that's usually been something that's been floating around. I've seen people taking Lamar Jackson at the back end of the first round, which I think is a little bit crazy. I've seen people taking Julio Jones up there. And then there's also some guys that keep dropping here. To me, DeAndre Hopkins, every draft I do, he winds up going a position or two later than he did the draft before there. Have you guys noticed the same thing? Do you see D-Hop kind of dropping back? Because at one time we were arguing that this was the number one wide receiver to take off the board over the last 2 or 3 years in fantasy. Now all of a sudden he's coming off the board as like the 5th receiver, sometimes the 6th receiver or later in some of these drafts. Do you guys agree with that? Do you think it's a little crazy? I mean, you would think moving to that offense, he's going to be in a pretty prime spot, but apparently people don't like him as much as they have in years past.
Yeah, I'll start just by saying I think there's a lot of competition in Arizona for targets. I think that's what kind of negates it, where he's no longer that wide receiver 1 alpha in Houston, where there's just a huge gap in the terms of talent, where he has Kirk and Fitzgerald to contend with for targets, and we know Kyler spreads the ball around pretty well. Like Deshaun Watson locked in on Hopkins. He had like a 30% target share, I think, in each of the last 3 seasons. I don't think he's going to see that. And you can argue that Julio Jones would have a higher target share. You can argue Chris Godwin may have a higher target share. Devontae Adams for sure. These are all guys that are most likely going ahead of Hopkins, where I think you nailed it. He's like pretty much the wide receiver 5 or 6 in this year's draft group.
Yeah, and I don't like the fact that you didn't mention my boy Andy Isabella, but we'll talk about that at another time. All right. And anybody else got any thoughts on D-Hop? Or, again, do you think I'm crazy, or are you guys seeing the same thing, that this is a guy who used to be the 1st or 2nd receiver off the board that's now dropping behind all the names that Tyler had mentioned?
Yeah, I actually got him in the 23rd overall pick in the last draft I started. So that just goes to show you, like you mentioned, he's fallen. He was the 5th receiver, if I'm not mistaken, taken off that board. And it's a trend that I'm noticing as well. But I'm okay with taking him on that back end if you're asking that question. I think that's totally fine taking him in that back end of the 2nd round.
I think some of this dropping is more of a result of the draft pool in 2020 rather than Hopkins actually getting much worse. I just feel like there's so many compared to the last couple of years. There's so many good top picks. I'm loving this first 2 rounds, even the later first compared to 2019, 2018, and particularly 2017. We were struggling back then, especially for running backs. So, it's just a different time. And I think he would have been going, still late first in that type of year.
All right, cool. So here, I want to play a little game here with you guys, all right? I got a bunch of guys who I've noticed that are kind of dropping down draft boards, and a bunch of guys that I've noticed that are kind of jumping up draft boards a little bit. So I'm going to talk about guys that are either dropping or jumping, and I want to see if anybody agrees. And if anybody disagrees, make the case why. Or guys that are jumping, if you disagree with why they're jumping, make the case why everybody else is stupid and you're smarter than the rest of them, all right? All right, so let's start here. Guy I've noticed has been dropping. You're getting 2 tight ends going in the top 25 picks in most drafts. Travis Kelce, George Kittle. The guy who I noticed dropping is Zach Ertz. Agree, disagree?
Agree.
I think I understand why it's happening. Because of Dallas Goedert, how he emerged last season. And I think that it's pretty clear that they're going to involve Goddard. Yes, Ertz still had a very good season or whatnot. But I just think that there's a lot of mouths to feed, and they're going to probably spread the ball around a little bit more than they did in years past.
All right, so Tyler, I saw you start talking here. So let me ask the question this way, change it around a little bit here. So in years past, it was Kelce, Kittle, and Ertz as the 3 guys going in the first 2 or 3 rounds. You still got Kittle, you still got Kelce going that early. But now Ertz is dropping back to, again, his ADP has been all over the place in the drafts I've been in. I've seen him go 50. I've seen him go 70. So he's definitely dropped from a guy who was going top 20, top 30 last year overall, one of those top tight ends. Not that we disagree. It seems like everybody agrees that he should be dropping. But where should he be dropping? Should he be a guy that's now a 4th-round pick, or should he be a guy that you wouldn't even touch to the 7th or the 8th?
Yeah, I'll just say, assuming we're playing on like best ball 10s where we don't have that tight end premium scoring, I think round 4 is perfect for him. I think he and Mark Andrews could easily contend for that tight end 3, and that's going to be the real battle. Which tight end you try to prefer? They have almost identical ADPs right now in that best ball 10 format. I've been leaning towards Andrews just because of Hayden Hurst's departure. I think there's a potential for Andrews to literally be Lamar Jackson's wide receiver 1. That's not really a stretch after what we saw last year. But for Ertz, I mean, drafters are reactionary. We saw Ertz get a little banged up last year. We saw the offense for the Eagles not really play to their ceiling, mostly due to injury. And I think drafters are reacting as such. They're reacting into how they saw last year finish. And that was with Ertz not putting up the same type of numbers as Kelsey and Kittle. I still think he's a very rock-solid player to get in the 4th round, though.
So, Russ, I'm going to change this question around again a little bit for you because Tyler kind of hit on one of the guys who I had on the jump list, and Mark Andrews. So if you're looking at Mark Andrews versus Zach Ertz, which one of those two do you like better? And, where are you drafting one or the other of them? If I said to you, you have to walk away from this draft with one of those two guys, your life depended on it, where would you go to get one of those two guys? And which one?
So this is one of those occasions where I do think tight end premium versus PPR versus, half point PPR actually really matters because Andrews is a big play guy and Ertz is that, he's basically averaged 10 yards per reception over the last 5 years. And I think we see another 800 to 1,000 receiving yard seasons, 80 to 90 catches, maybe even 95 to 100 if he plays all 16. I like Andrews as an upside play, but I'm probably still taking Ertz just because I feel really secure that he's going to get that 80 to 90 receptions. Kind of like Jason Witten. He has that Jason Witten feel where it's like it's probably not going to be pretty, but I'm gonna be happy by the end of the year.
So you know what? I was totally on your side until you had to use this Jason Witten comp.
Yeah.
Now I'm cracking there.
Come on, Russ.
Hey, age 30, Jason Witten was pretty good. Age 38, Jason Witten, not so great.
Yeah. Hey, you know what, though? He did catch a couple touchdowns. He's all right around the red zone. He did do a little bit of that last year. All right, so next guy that seems to be dropping, Keenan Allen. And, I mean, obviously I understand it. Phillip Rivers is gone. We don't know what the quarterback situation is going to be there. You got Tyrod Taylor. You got the rookie kid that they drafted in Herbert. We don't know how long either one of them is going to be under center. We don't know if Tyrod is under center. We know what he did in Buffalo. It wasn't really all that great for the passing game. But both Keenan Allen and Mike Williams seem to be almost free-falling where, I have seen a whole bunch of guys who are less talented than both of these wide receivers being drafted ahead of them. And the only thing I can think of is it's because of the QB situation. Now, Keenan Allen is somewhere around like 40, 50 draft pick. I've seen him drop even into the 70s, 80s in some of these drafts here. So we're talking around like 6, 7 for Keenan Allen, which would have been crazy 2 years ago. This was a guy, 2nd round, 3rd round draft pick there. And Mike Williams is dropping. Mike Williams yesterday was not even drafted in the top 100 of a draft that I was in. Mike Williams is super talented here. So the question I'm asking you is, I understand that without Phillip Rivers and with the new quarterback in there, it may change the way that they play. But is it going to change it so much that guys like Keenan Allen and Mike Williams deserve to be in free fall and drafts right now?
I'll head this one off. This is stupid. I don't know what's going on. I'm hitting the buy button, but obviously if the value's like going to keep dropping, I'll continue to take that discount. Obviously, Keenan Allen's had 100 receptions 2 of the last 3 years, 97 in each of the last 3. Is he probably going to see less than that? I'd almost guarantee if it's Tyrod Taylor for even half the season. But I mean, talented guys tend to figure it out. Do I think he gets to 1,000 yards this year? I'd say barring an injury, I think that's pretty certain. Could it be an ugly year? Could the Chargers stink? Yes. But Phillip Rivers, I mean, if you watch those games last year, his arm was toasted. I don't know what his Colts season's going to look like, but on deep passes, he had nothing left. And that's why this Mike Williams thing is like, if you watched last year, it can't get worse. It cannot get worse than Phillip Rivers throwing up those meatballs. So, you know, Mike Williams had all-time – he was the Leonard Fournette of wide receivers with the touchdown variance. And he had 1,000 yards last year. And in Dynasty, it's even worse. He's falling 10th, 11th round to startups now. I don't get it. But I'll take the discount.
All right. Anybody else want to weigh in on that?
I mean, the Keenan Allen dropping, you got to understand it's totally because of the quarterback situation. I agree with Russell here. He's super, super talented, though. So I'm going to take him there. Especially in that 6th round, I think that's very good value for him. I think he's a little bit safer than Mike Williams because I don't think Tyrod Taylor is going to be able to have 2 1,000-yard receivers. And then if they switch to the quarterback, the rookie quarterback at some point in the season, that's going to be even worse. But I saw Mike Williams go in the 12th round. Look, I don't mind taking a couple shares of Williams in like the 12th round because the kid does have an immense ceiling. And he just stated the year before last where he doesn't need to get 1,000 yards, but he could score 10 touchdowns very easily. So I don't mind taking a couple shares, although I wouldn't overinvest in Mike Williams just because that quarterback situation is very scary to me.
So Tyler, I'm gonna take it in a little bit of a different direction here for you. Russ actually mentioned T.Y. Hilton here as well, who's going to be catching passes from I forget what he said, meatball throwing, something like that.
Yes.
So he's going to be the paisan on the other end of those meatballs there. Also another guy who's been dropping in drafts with T.Y. Hilton. So T.Y. Hilton, Keenan Allen, who are you drafting first?
That's a tough one because I don't think T.Y. Hilton has the ability to stay healthy for a full 16 games. That's tough to say, but he's entering his age 31 season. He's got a lot of lower body injuries piling up throughout his career. We saw the meatballs from last year. I actually wrote down like our injury impact in our draft guides bold predictions segment. The injury impact player I wrote down was T.Y. Hilton because I think he won't last the whole season, and we've seen Michael Pittman emerge as one of the better rookie campaigns. So I'm not going to go with T.Y. Hilton here. I'm going to go with Keenan Allen.
Interesting. All right, so now let's stay with the Indianapolis Colts here. They brought in Jonathan Taylor. I actually wrote Jonathan Taylor up as my number 1 handcuff when I originally had the paper sent to me for all of our bold predictions for the season here. But from everything that I'm seeing right now, it's looking like people are treating him like the starter because he's going in like the end of round 2, the beginning of round 3 in a lot of these drafts that I'm in with Marlin Mac in free fall. So let me ask it this way, because obviously I think most of us would agree that, Jonathan Taylor has a chance to step in and really take the reins over here, and that would mean Marlon Mack is the secondary piece there. So we all know why he's in free fall, so we don't want to talk about that. The question I want to ask you is, where do you try to catch that falling knife? Because I have now seen Marlon Mack's ADP dropping into the 70s. So now we're talking about him as a 6th, 7th, 8th round pick right there. Where are you looking to pull the trigger on a guy like Marlon Mack? Or are you looking to pull the trigger? All right, let's ask that question first. Is anybody interested in having a Marlon Mack this year? Or is it kind of just like at this point he's a backup handcuff that if he falls to you when you need a 4th or 5th or 6th running back at some point around round 8, 9, 10, you draft him? Or is this a guy that you actually think can still – I mean, listen, he's still a guy that put up some good numbers and is running behind arguably the best offensive line in the league.
I'll take this one because I'm a Marlon Mack guy. I liked him a lot last season, but this year I'm staying totally away from him. If he was able to catch passes out of the backfield, I'd be considering him. But he's so one-dimensional, and Taylor's such a better running back overall than Mack is that I think it's only a matter of time where we see kind of Mack just not have any type of role, and then the pass catching back there. Is probably going to be Nyheim Hines anyway. So it's not like, a Mack is going to have a significant role here unless there's an injury. He could have some goal line work. They might utilize him in the red zone. But you're hoping for touchdowns at best with Mack. And it's, not something I'm willing to take a shot at. There's just no upside. That's my biggest concern. There's no upside.
Don't disagree. Everybody else kind of with the same mindset here?
Yeah, I don't want to give away all of my best ball guide bold predictions, but
I
must avoid was Marlin Mac.
Okay. All right. Well, you know what? At this point, we'll say a prayer for him. We'll bury him. We'll worry about
I mean,
it.
he is a great handcuff, and I love the Colts running back. Like, if I'm taking total yards from scrimmage for the whole year for a team, I like the Colts running back situation.
Like I said, they're running behind one of the arguably the best offensive line in the league. I mean,
and like, if I were to say Jonathan Taylor gets injured, then we'd be all in. But Jonathan Taylor's never really been injured in his life, and that's a problem. And he's basically Nick Chubb 2.0 here, and that's a problem as well. So I'm not necessarily all in on Taylor for 2020, but man, it just kind of sucks for Mac because he was in a great spot before.
And you just jinxed Taylor by saying he's never been hurt in his life. So
now that's awful. That's awful.
No,
There you go.
You had to go.
Cut that. Yeah.
So let's stick with the running backs here, because here's another interesting one. Two guys that I've been noticing. I guess I can't really say two guys dropping, because I guess it depends what you thought of Zach Moss to begin with. But it seems to me that everybody is looking at this Buffalo backfield as Devin Singletary is going to do all the work. Zach Moss is going to clean it up with all the touchdowns in the end zone here. And it feels like both guys are going below where their ADP started out as. And, you know, people are skipping over Singletary in drafts right now when I thought he would have been going a little bit higher. And he's kind of dropping to maybe the third to fourth, even the fifth round in some of these, some of these drafts here. And then Zach Moss is another guy who I guess he's actually more of a mover up, because now he's in like the 80s or the 90s, I think, for ADP. So this is a guy that people are starting to say, like, I mean, especially in like a half PPR, or I don't know anybody who still plays non-PPR, but if you do, if this is the guy that's going to be getting those touchdowns, there's going to be some value there. So what do you guys think of this whole Zach Moss, Devin Singletary thing? Are people too down on Singletary because Moss might get the touchdowns? Are they too high on Moss, thinking that he's going to steal too much of this from Singletary? How should we be looking at the Buffalo running backs? Because Buffalo is a team projected for wins, arguably projected to win that division, arguably going to beat up on most of the teams in that division, which means should be good for the running backs, no?
I think it'll work. It'll absolutely work. They're a good organization with a good coaching staff. I just don't like any of their players. Like, I didn't like Zach Moss as a prospect. I didn't like Devin Singletary as a prospect. I didn't like Josh Allen as a prospect. Stephon Diggs and John Brown, I'm just usually the lowest of anyone on them. And it's just like, I just don't like any of their players, but I know it's going to work, kind of like the last couple years. So I just let other people take them, but I do respect the upside there. I do agree it's going to be a nice running game again this year.
Tyler, I know you wanted to say something. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's just tough in the best ball format, where last year Singletary had only 2 top 12 weeks, and that was with Frank Gore. Like, he has an arguably better back to contend with for touches now. Still has Josh Allen to fight off for red zone looks. It's just not an offense I really want to invest in, like Russ said. Like, there's just a lot of different paths for them scoring. I think if you are to take a Buffalo Bills player, my favorite one is probably just going to be Josh Allen, where you just get all the scoring hopefully encapsulated there. But he's probably going at like QB6, QB7 prices right now. That's a little too rich for my blood.
Yeah,
I thought Tyler was going to say Dawson Knox for a second, and I was just going to be like, holy crap, we're going there, baby.
Honestly, though, not even joking around, Dawson Knox has been getting drafted in every draft I've been in. Like, towards the end, like, he's the tight end 3 for somebody, but he's been going off the board in all those drafts right there. Actually, you know who my favorite player to draft in Buffalo is? Buffalo defense. That's the one part of that team that I think everybody kind of wants there. All right, so let's switch this around a little bit. Let's talk about guys that are really kind of firing up the charts right now. Armando, let me start with you here. The one guy who's firing up the charts that I'm very hesitant about is Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders right now has gone all the way up in some of these drafts I've seen to the back end of the first round. I feel like that's a little bit too rich for me to want to take Miles Sanders. So let me ask you this question. We're looking at Mixon, Chubb, Josh Jacobs, Kenyon Drake, Aaron Jones, Austin Eckler. All right. So say you're looking at that group right there, because that's the group that's kind of ending up at the end of the first round, the beginning of the second round here in a lot of these drafts that I'm doing, along with Miles Sanders. Of those 6 guys, Mixon, Chubb, I'm going to take Mixon and Chubb out of there because to me, those guys are – you clearly take them before Miles.
Yeah.
So let's go Josh Jacobs, Kenyon Drake, Aaron Jones, Austin Eckler, and Miles Sanders. If you're looking at that group right there, where does Sanders fit? Is he number 1 in that group for you? Is he number 5 in that group? Where does he fit amongst those guys?
He's probably number 1 for me. I think he's a good combination of, someone that's going to run the ball in between the tackles and then catch passes in the backfield. We saw it firsthand last year with his involvement in the pass game, as a rookie, 50 catches. I think that's significant. I think that's what you're going to kind of see this year. I think he just probably provides the most upside. I know Eckler had a phenomenal season and whatnot, but I think that in his aspect, there's going to be regression in the pass game where I think Miles Sanders can still grow in the passing game for the Eagles. So those two are probably very close for me, but I'm going to go with Sanders. I just think there's a ton of upside there.
All right, Russ or Tyler, either one of you want to hop in on this?
I think this just speaks to how good the running back group is this year and how getting a back end draft spot can be very profitable. I've been stuck with this situation many times because I often get either the number 1 pick or the number 12. I get nothing in between for some reason.
Those are my favorite drafts, though. I actually kind of like that. Gives me time in between that swing pick to go have a cigarette. It's perfect.
Right. I will say that I think they're all in a very similar, tightly grouped tier where you can make a case for any one of them above each one. And a lot of it is because of the PPR ability. Like targets are worth 2.75 times a carry. We want those backs that have that reception ability. And all 4 of those guys that you mentioned in that cohort, not really Josh Jacobs anymore because of everything they've been doing, but they all carry some receiving upside. So I think it really comes down to if you're a volume player or if you're a player that doesn't go that heavy on best ball 10s. If you're a volume player, you kind of want to spread out your exposure pretty evenly. But if not, I think this is where you can make some conviction plays. And I agree with Armando where I think Sanders kind of has that edge where he could be that high upside play that rivals that top 5. There aren't many backs that could do that, but we saw Carlos Hyde already get signed. I guess the only real competition right now is Devonta Freeman, but I mean, nobody's really lining up to sign him right now. I think his demands are too high for a contract. He might have to lower it or sign elsewhere. But assuming they don't get a pass catching back, I think Sanders could jump into that top 5 as a contender.
All right, so I'm apparently a little bit lower on Miles Sanders than everybody else. Russ, everybody else told me I'm fucking wrong. Do you agree?
I'd like to wave my little bingo thing with Lamar Miller as my bingo in the middle. I think he's going to sign somewhere and just absolutely ruin a backfield. But Miles Sanders is really weird from a range of outcome standpoint because he had a really great rookie season, kind of in that Gio Bernard. I don't like his first season in Cincinnati. He was looking like an absolute monster. But there is that range of outcomes where Sanders does never become, that featured LaShawn McCoy, sort of smaller, but, featured weapon.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think if he stays healthy, 1,200, 1,300 yards from scrimmage is pretty much the floor. So I do like him, but, like you mentioned, Chubb and Mixon are clearly ahead for me. And then I'm spreading out that tier in terms of who I'm getting shares of. That's kind of how I would play that.
Yeah, so that, to be honest with you, that's kind of the way that I've been doing it too, is up into Chubb, I pretty much have conviction on who I'm drafting depending on what spot I'm in. Once I hit that spot there, though, I've kind of been spreading it around with the teams that I've had when I've had, picks of like 10, 11, 12 towards the back end of the draft where these are the choices you're going to have. If you're picking 10, 11, 12 in a draft, these are the guys that are going to be available for you either on the end of the first round or on the swing back at the beginning of the second round. These are probably the running backs that you're going to be putting together with, like the Tyreek Hills and the Devontae Adams. And, those are the guys that are coming off the board, the Chris Godwins. Like, that's basically the choice that you're making there, unless you want to go QB and take, like, Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes, which people are doing at that spot too. Not that that's the way I'm building my teams, but, we can talk about the whole late round QB thing in another time here. So here's the last question I'm going to ask you guys here today for this little powwow we're having. Guys that are jumping up in drafts, and this guy is jumping up because I think people forgot that he's going to be a starting quarterback this year. And if you look at some of the sites, he's listed basically outside of like the top 30 or 40 guys with the guys that were backups. And that's Nick Foles. I found Nick Foles being around in drafts like the last 2 or 3 rounds of some drafts that I'm in, just because he's not like listed towards the top of the ADP, because some people still are looking at Mitch Trubisky at this point as, oh yeah, Mitch Trubisky's the Bears starters. They didn't go get Nick Foles not to play him. And we all watched Mitch Trubisky last year. If Mitch Trubisky was any good, they wouldn't have had to go get Nick Foles. They got Nick Foles to start Nick Foles. Nick Foles has been moving up draft boards. Should we be hopping on Nick Foles late in these drafts now before everybody else realizes, oh shit, Nick Foles is the starting quarterback for the Chicago Bears, and the Chicago Bears have some weapons?
It's ugly, but yes, it's ugly. It's ugly. And Nick Foles, his career is just insane. And again, I was trying to do this in 2019. I felt I was getting a huge discount, particularly in Dynasty, heading into last year, and then he just got hurt the first week. So, as long as that doesn't happen, I do see him, beating out Trubisky. I think he's pretty clearly a better quarterback. It's just his career is so insane. It's like he's either a Super Bowl winning and then 30 touchdowns, 2 interception season type guy, or he's absolutely garbage. I mean, he has a whole Rams career that's just totally wiped off the planet at this point. So I don't know, but I do think as a last round guy, if you need a third quarterback, yeah. And I do think he's a great value in super flex dynasties right now. You can basically get him for free, like Benny was saying. Nobody's really pricing in that he's actually could be a starter this year. So I like him.
Now you say could. Does anybody think I'm overreacting and thinking that he's going to beat out Trubisky for the job? Like, does anybody really think Mitchell Trubisky is going to have this job over Nick Foles?
No, but
I'd be stunned.
It's gonna be weird. Like, there's gonna be a few games where they're like, and Mitch Trubisky starting the second half, and you're like, can you not? But I don't know. We'll see.
I think we're gonna see a lot of that.
When you got Big Dick Nick and Little Dick Mitch, you're gonna put Big Dick Nick in first. It's the way to do it. Like, I don't know. I mean, honestly, Mitch Trubisky 2 years ago had a monster season. And I remember people saying, like, he's the future. He's the next guy. He's the, I think he was like QB4 or something like that a couple of years ago. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But
he was amazing rushing, yeah.
Yeah.
There were MVP bets for.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like people were literally talking about him and like,
crazy.
He's the future of the NFL kind of quarterback thing. And I was like, pump the brakes there a little bit. Like, it's great that he's got some wheels, but the chicken wing is still not, not enough to be an NFL quarterback and win anything here. All right, so that was some of the stuff that I had noticed. Guys moving up, guys moving down. Kind of wanted to get your ideas on it. I'm sure these guys have a lot more ideas on all this stuff, and I'm sure they know that they're going to be writing it all down and putting it in the draft guide over there at fantasyguru.com. So make sure you get over there. These 3 guys have been working their ass off for the last month, and will be working their ass off for the next month too. Kind of putting all that stuff together. Articles are coming out every day over there. And I don't think it's very expensive at the moment. I think I looked at it. It was like, what, $40, $50, I think is what we're charging for the draft guide this year. That includes all the rankings. It includes the rankings for PPR, includes the non-PPR rankings. I think there's some IDP rankings in there as well. So, I mean, we got you covered from every angle. Russ has mentioned he's doing some of the dynasty stuff over there. You're going to get the different types of, strategies that you can do, whether it be best ball or redraft, stuff that Tyler and Armando were doing here. So a lot of good information over there. Get over to fantasyguru.com and check it out. For my boys in the roundtable, we'll go backwards this time. Armando, Russ, and Tyler. I'm Benny signing off for the opening line on EliteSportsBetting.com. Almost lost my train of thought there.